We're going to discuss three distinct, though interconnected pathways to change. The ABCs of psychology, which we've mentioned before. The ABCs, the A is the affect, the emotion. The B is the behavior, the action. And C is the cognition, the thought. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each one of the three. And for each one, we're going to talk about the gradual change approach and the acute change approach. So in a sense, we're building a 3x2. Affect, behavior, cognition times gradual and acute. And we're going to talk about 6 different approaches to change. These 6 approaches to change are interconnected. It's important to connect them. And ideally, we want all 3. Why? Quote that I've used a few times and will use again. John Dryden, British poet. We first make our habits, and then our habits make us. In order to change habit, in order to bring about lasting change, we need to have as much of a solid approach, as much force in the intervention. It's not just enough to focus on emotions, not just enough to focus on action. It's not enough just to focus on our thinking. We want to focus on the 3, the A, the B, and the C. Think about it. It's like habit can be looked at as a flood. There is a flood in our mind of certain neurons firing in a certain neural pathway. And what we want to do is to overcome this flood. And to overcome this flood, we need as much force as we can. Therefore, we want to use as many approaches as we can. Before we jump into the A, one more thing. What do we want to change? What can we change? And what can we not change? So according to researchers led by the likes of Sonia Lyubomirsky, Ed Diner, happiness comprises, or to explain an individual's happiness, we need to look at 3 factors. The first factor is the genetic set range. It's not a genetic set point, it's a range. We're all born with certain predisposition toward happiness and well-being. Some people are born with, the smiley face, with the smiley spoon in their mouth. Others, less so. And we're all somewhere on this, bell curve. Some people luckier than others. As I've mentioned a couple of times before, I wasn't born that lucky. I was born more on the anxious side of this curve, not with the happiness spoon in my mouth. Which, by the way, I think helps me teach this class. Because I do these things, I apply these things, I make a difference in my life. Been there, done that, doing it. I can speak from personal experiences, as you know. Now, some people may look at it and say, that's terrible that we have a genetic set range. Well, my answer to that is, it's not good, it's not bad. It is. The law of gravity is not good, it's not bad. It is. And nature, to be commanded, must be obeyed. We need to look at our nature, understand it, and then make the best of it. About 50% of our levels of well-being, of the variance in explaining happiness, can be accounted for by genes. Which explains some of the results of, for example, the twin studies, why there were such similarities among the twins, even if they were, or between the twins, even if they were reared apart. Because genes matter. Not good, not bad, it is. They matter 50%, not 100%, thank God, but 50% of the variance. The important thing to keep in mind is that we have a lot of control what we do with these genes. One could argue that success, and I'm just throwing out numbers, I don't know what it is exactly, but success of basketball players is determined 50% by genes in terms of how much fast twitch versus slow twitch they have in their muscles, how high they can jump, how coordinated they are, how tall they are. All these things matter. They go into and these are determined by genes. However, if Michael Jordan hadn't worked on his basketball, I would be a better player than he is. If he didn't work on his basketball at all. And I did and do. In other words, also with genes, people who don't work on their happiness, even if they have the best of genes, will not do as well as people with less happy genes who work on it. So work matters a great deal. The second thing that matters, that makes up the 100% of variance of happiness, external circumstances. Of course, extreme circumstances make a lot of difference, whether we're living in a free country versus oppression, that makes a lot of difference. However, in general, external circumstances beyond the extremes, beyond being homeless on the street, make very little difference. In fact, about 10% of the total variance. So, genetic genes, 50%, external circumstances such as place of residence, such as income, such as weather, and again, not for people, for example, who have seasonal affective disorder. Then of course it matters whether we get sun or not. I'm talking about most people, not people with SAD. So, out of these extremes, the external circumstances matter about 10%, not much. The third thing, the rest of the 40%, is accounted for by intentional activities. What that means is what we do, how we act, what we think about, how we interpret the world, what we focus on. In essence, what 1504 is about. What we've discussed since the first class, what we're going to discuss even more in the second half of the semester. These intentional activities, our focus, these are essentially our ABCs. This is where real, meaningful change comes. And this is where we're going to focus. Would be nice if we could do something with our genes. Would be nice. Cannot. Would be nice if we had more control of our external circumstances. But even if we did, and many people do, many people sitting in this room or watching at home do have more control, doesn't make that much of a difference. What makes the most difference that we have control over are the intentional activities, our interpretation of the world, and our action. So let's jump into it. The A, affect, emotion, the heart. There's a connection between, an etymological connection, linguistic connection between emotion, motivation, motion. Emotion, to move away. Without emotion, we wouldn't move. You've read about it in the book, or you will read about it in the book, about Eliot, the person who Damasio researched, who just lost his emotional faculty, and with it lost all motivation to act or do anything, even though his cognition was in place. We need emotion in order to move. So I want to talk about, again, two aspects within emotion. The first, gradual change. The second, more acute change. The gradual change is mindful meditation. Mindful meditation is arguably the most powerful intervention for bringing about calm and equanimity. A lot of research on it. We're going to spend a whole week talking about it. Today what I want to do is just introduce it, the basic, the foundation of the spiral of mindfulness. John Kabat-Zinn, who in many ways is responsible for bringing serious research into this realm, he, along with people like Tara Bennett-Goldman, people like Herbert Benson from the medical school here, brought serious research to this, what was considered a mystical field. Cultivating mindfulness can lead to the discovery of deep realms of relaxation, calmness, and insight within yourself. The path to it in any moment lies no farther than your own body and mind and your own breathing. This is the amazing thing about mindfulness. The results that you'll see that I'll talk about when we talk about research, quite literally mind-boggling. I mean, they change the way our mind works, transform our brain. Just by focusing on the breath, by focusing on parts of our body, by being present. All of us have the capacity to be mindful. All it involves is cultivating our ability to pay attention in the present moment. Let's experience it just for a minute or two. So here's what I'd like you to do, once again, if you feel comfortable with it. So sit back on your chair with your back against the backrest. Make yourself as comfortable as you can. Plant both feet on the ground comfortably. And If you feel comfortable, just close your eyes. And move your attention to your breathing. Take a deep breath in into your belly. And slow, quiet, gentle exhalation. Deep, slow inhalation all the way into your belly. Slow, gentle, quiet, long exhalation. If your mind wanders, just return to your breathing. Now, in your mind's eye, just scan your body, your forehead, your eyes, your nose, mouth, your neck, your chest, your upper back, lower back, your legs, all the way down to your feet. Just scan your body while continuing to breathe deeply, slowly, and gently. And through your scan, find a part of your body that is a little bit more tense than the others. It could be your jaws. It could be your neck. It could be your shoulders, your stomach, where you're feeling a little bit of disease. It could be your legs, your knees, your feet. Identify that one part of the body that is a little bit more tense than the others and focus on it and continue to breathe. Take a deep breath into that part of your body, and when you let go, when you exhale, also let go of the tension that's there. Just relax it. And take a few deep breaths into that part of your body and relax it and let go. Return your focus to your breathing. Take a deep breath in, slow, gentle, quiet, long exhale, relaxing with the exhalation. Deep breathing in, deep, slow, gentle, long exhaling. And at the end of the next exhalation, gently, slowly, quietly, open your eyes. Once again, if the person next to you is asleep, just gently wake them up. Tara Bennett Goldman If someone is speaking in their sleep, please wake them up. Tara Bennett Goldman, in her book Emotional Alchemy. Mindfulness means seeing things as they are, without trying to change them. The point is to dissolve our reactions to disturbing emotions, being careful not to reject the emotion itself. This is what permission to be human is all about. Allowing the emotion, experiencing the emotion, and just breathing through it. And very often, when we do that, not always, but very often, it dissolves. And with it, with the emotional, the solution of the emotion, comes also the psychological dissolution of this painful emotion. Again, we'll talk much more about this very important intervention after spring break. This is about gradual change. What we'll see when we talk about research is that even if this is gradual change, within as little as 8 weeks of regular meditation, our brain actually starts to change its form, to transform. Our immune system strengthens after as little as 8 weeks of regular daily meditation. And it doesn't have to be 5 hours a day, as little as 30 minutes or 20 minutes a day can already affect change. This is gradual, slow. Hopefully something that you will take up as a lifelong intervention. Here is an example of more acute change when it comes to our emotion. So when I thought about filling in this box in the 3x2 model, how do I find an acute emotional change? Immediately my mind went to research in clinical psychology, specifically to post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, something that has been studied, thousands and thousands of articles, research done in our department too. And when I looked at it, I said, well, this is an example of an acute change, a very acute change, because what happens when we have a trauma, many people after the trauma are changed forever, for the rest of their lives, if they have PTSD. It actually changes the chemicals that flow through our brain. It changes the structure of our brain, creates new neural pathways, kills a lot of old neural pathways as a result of a single experience. It's a sledgehammer. It is very widespread, unfortunately. I mentioned it last time. 30% of Vietnam vets have PTSD. 30%. 8% from the first Gulf War have PTSD. As I mentioned, we don't have the exact data yet from the second Gulf War, but the numbers are likely going to be higher than that. After 9/11, or before 9/11 rather, there were 20,000 individuals with PTSD south of 110th Street, New York. Right after 9/11, 60,000 individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now this has consequences. Again, it has consequences on the way our brain functions very often, not always, but very often for the rest of our lives. So this is an acute change. It comes immediately, one trauma, 9/11, or seeing something terrible in war. And then that often has an effect for the rest of for the entire life. It's a shock treatment, a negative shock treatment. Now when I look at PTSD, and when I thought about it, I asked, okay, so what does positive psychology have to do with this? I mean, this is clinical psychology. This is quote-unquote negative psychology. Well, the answer is a lot. First of all, a lot of research starting only in 1998, again, 10 years ago, the time when positive psychology came onto the scene. Research on post-traumatic growth. And what was found was that, in fact, more people experience growth as a result of a trauma than PTSD. However, we don't talk about post-traumatic growth. Everyone knows about PTSD. But again, this is another example of where the light is not shed on something that is actually working well. And what is working here? Most people are extremely resilient, able to withstand trauma. And that is a very empowering understanding to have. It will become more of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and more people will experience post-traumatic growth if they only knew that it was a possibility, that it was common. If they didn't feel guilty about experiencing growth as a result of trauma. How can I grow after what I saw, what I experienced in Vietnam? It's wrong. Again, things don't happen for the best, but some people are able to make the best of things that happen. Post-traumatic growth. It happens when people begin to focus on the benefit. So what is the benefit of this trauma? It didn't happen for the best, but what have I learned from my cancer, for example? Well, to be closer to my family, to appreciate a breath, to appreciate the flowers, to enjoy my friends more. Didn't happen for the best, but I did make the best of it, benefit finding. Or many people who are able to find meaning in it through journaling, and we'll talk about journaling next class. Or people who are able to share their experiences of the trauma. Remember the difference between Holocaust survivors and Vietnam vets. Holocaust survivors shared, talked about it, wrote about it. Vietnam vets ruminated about it. Going back to the Lyubomirsky study. And when you just ruminate without sharing, without taking it out, it becomes stronger, and then it's more likely to become PTSD. But it doesn't always do that. And it's important to understand the mechanism of post-traumatic growth. So here is the question that I had. This is a positive psychology course. Remember what positive psychology is that it focuses on what works. So the question that I asked myself as I was preparing for this course was this. Is there a positive equivalent to trauma? Something that is so powerful, yet positive, that will change the way our brain functions in an instant. Like a sledgehammer. Is there something like that? Or in other words, what I asked is, can a single positive experience create a positive channel that will lead to a permanent increase in well-being, calm, and positive memories? In other words, the opposite of PTSD. And again, ask and you shall receive. A question begins a quest, and as soon as I asked this question, it opened up channels that I didn't see before, that were literally right in front of my eyes. And this was the work that I've studied for many years of one of my intellectual heroes, Abraham Maslow, who talks about the peak experience. Now, what I'm going to talk about now is more hypothesis than well-grounded research. It's a hypothesis that I hope some of you will research either here as senior thesis or in the future. Will encourage people to research these ideas. Everything that I share in this class is based on very rigorous research. This is one area where it's a hypothesis. But bear with me and see what you think of it, of this hypothesis, when I finish explaining it. Because there is some research on it, not enough, for a stamp of approval yet. But think about it. Does it make sense? So let's see, what is the peak experience? Maslow's definition of a peak experience, it's a generalization for the best moments of the human being, for the happiest moments of life, for experiences of ecstasy, rapture, bliss, of the greatest joy. I found that such experiences came from profound aesthetic experiences, such as creative ecstasies, moments of mature love, perfect sexual experiences, parental love, experiences of natural childbirth, and many others. Everyone, or most people, have experienced peak experiences. Again, whether it was with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whether it was reading a book, whether it was listening to your favorite piece of music. Just being one with the experience. It's what many theologians talk about as the religious experience, a spiritual experience, where you just walked through the yard and suddenly felt one with John Harvard. Well, maybe not. But experience just one with everything. This is the experience that they talk about in Zen, being connected to the present, feeling so good, so complete, like you don't need anything else. Everything is right here. I know I experience it with my family at times. Last night, having dinner with my family and friends, we were sitting around and I just felt, this is it. What else do I need? Just being so complete, so in the moment. A peak experience. Now, these peak experiences usually don't last for very long. They come and they go. It's a peak. However, they can, and often do, have repercussions. Now, maybe you can see now where I'm going with this. So what I thought about when I thought about peak experiences was maybe, just maybe, this is the positive equivalent to the trauma. Maybe it's a shock treatment of ecstasy that can have effects beyond just the experience itself, just like PTSD has effects beyond the experience itself. There are people today who are living and reliving 9/11. Still affecting them, still affecting their brain, created new channels, new pathways that didn't exist before 9/11/01. So is peak experience a shock treatment of ecstasy? If peak experience is the positive equivalent of a trauma, then the equivalent of a post-traumatic stress disorder is what I call post-peak experience order. I know, cheesy, but I think there is something behind it. Some research on it, some very little, but I think it actually works. So one of the research studies that was done on it was by one of Maslow's students. She studied women after childbirth. And what she found was that sometimes, not always, in fact, not most times, but often, these women experienced a peak experience and it changed their lives. As a result of it, they became more confident, more generous and benevolent, and happier, just as a result of a single experience. A shock treatment of ecstasy, something which happened to them, which meant so much to them. Now, they did this research in the early 50s or early 50s. Today, it may also happen more often with men, because men today are more likely to be present when the child is born. I know that when David was born, I burst out crying. It was a very powerful experience when it happened. Certainly a peak experience for me. Here is what Maslow says about peak experiences, and again, not talking explicitly about post-peak experience order, but alluding to it. Peak experiences often have consequences. They can do the same there as psychotherapy. If one keeps his goals right, and if one knows just what he is about, and if one is conscious of what he is going toward. We can certainly talk, on the one hand, of the breaking up of symptoms, like the breaking up of cliches, of anxieties, or the like. Or on the other hand, we can talk about the development of spontaneity, and of courage, and of Olympian or godlike humor and suchness, sensory awareness, body awareness, and the like. So what he's saying here is that these effects can have consequences beyond just the peak experience, if we do certain things, such as follow up on it. William James, in the Varieties of Religious Experiences, talks about such moments that change lives and how they change lives. Peak experience can quite literally lead to a new brain order. And again, the jury's still out on the research, but there is more and more suggestions, and we'll talk about it next time as well, that show that there is something there. That it can be the positive equivalent of a trauma, if we know what we do to do with it. And here is the important issue. The question is, first, do we experience peak experiences and experience more of them? And second, after we experience peak experience, how can we make it more likely that we enjoy PPEO? Because just like not everyone after a trauma experiences PTSD, in fact, the majority don't, Just in the same way, most people don't experience PPEO after a peak experience. How do you increase the likelihood, first, of increasing peak experience, and second, of increasing the likelihood of post-peak experience order? So to enhance peak experience, just very briefly, because essentially the course is about that. So I'm going to just throw out a few ideas that we've talked about or some that we will talk about. First, permission to be human. Acceptance, accepting emotions. Why? Because if we don't accept painful emotions, if we don't give ourselves the permission to be human, we're blocking our emotional pathways. And positive emotions and painful emotions often flow through the same emotional pathways. And when we're limiting one, we're very often limiting the other. So if we open up the pathways, give ourselves the permission to be human, give ourselves the permission to cry when we're sad or ecstatic, that very often opens up, makes it more likely that we experience positive emotions as well. Paradoxical, but this is the paradox of the permission to be human. When we give ourselves the permission to experience painful emotions, we're more likely to experience the positive emotions. Mindfulness, being present. A lot of times when we're listening to music, for example, really listening to music, not just having it as a background while text messaging, doing homework, and talking to our friends. But when we really listen to music that we love, very often we have a peak experience, being present. According to Maslow's research, these are two of the most likely areas where we can experience the peak experience. And by the way, this I believe is innate. Even I see with Shirelle, my 1-year-old daughter, when there is music, when we dance, she laughs. This is not something we taught her. I think we're born with this inclination for music and dance. We need to take time for that. Having a meaningful goal, when we're on purpose, when we're doing things that we love to do, when we're doing is meaningful and significant to us, we're much more likely to experience peak experiences. Finally, one of the greatest barriers in our culture, time. It's very difficult to experience peak experiences when we're on the rush, when we're stressed and anxious. These are peak experience killers. Whether it's when making love, whether it's when listening to music, whether it's when spending time with friends, or all of the above together. How do we enhance the likelihood of PPEO once we've experienced peak experience? First thing, replaying and imagining. Remember, the mind doesn't know the difference between the imaginary and the real. It plays it over and over again. And when we play it over and over again, the neural pathway is reinforced. The sledgehammer begins the neural pathway, and then we reinforce it through replaying, through imagination. Writing about it. This is going to be your response paper next week. Writing about a peak experience. When we journal about it, describing it, not analyzing it. Remember the difference with Lyubomirsky. Positive emotions, positive experiences, it's not as helpful to analyze. So just to describe it, once again, reinforces the neural pathways. We relive it, we replay it. Once again, taking time. Taking time. And finally, taking action, which is how we can reinforce the initial experience of the peak experience. Reinforce the neural pathway. So I had an insight, an aha moment as a result of this peak experience. Now I'm going to do something about it and act.